Hello and welcome. I'm Sumita Kareer and you're watching Rush Hour, a 30-minute roundup of all the big stories coming in from markets, business, international and domestic politics that affect us. And beginning this show with our lead story this hour. In the latest from the Ukraine-Russia conflict, Moscow has pulled out of the grain deal with Kyiv. Remember, Ukraine is a major exporter of grains like rice and wheat to many African and Middle Eastern countries like Ethiopia and Turkey. Ukraine is also a major contributor to the Black Sea Grain Initiative to help alleviate global food security concerns. This action has now, from Russia, has now put a pause on this. What impact will have on global food prices and supply? Well, to discuss this further, I'm now joined by Simon J. Evenett, Professor of International Trade and Economic Development, University of St. Gallen in Switzerland. Professor, thank you very much for joining us this evening on ET Now.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Right. So, Professor, I want to understand, so now that Russia has suspended the deal, stopped the export of grain, I want to understand, is this being used as some sort of a concessionary tactic to sort of gain some concession from the West? And what's now? What is the world looking at now? Soaring grain prices, a hunger crisis perhaps for the poorest of the countries?
So to your first point, it appears that Russia was not satisfied with what it sees as concessions that it wanted with respect to certain sanctions, and as a result has pulled the plug on this deal. Whether or not they've really pulled the plug for good is unclear, but there is obviously probably negotiations going on behind closed doors as we speak. The second point is that if this deal has collapsed, then there will be shortages in countries which we're used to sourcing from Ukraine. So these are the countries that you mentioned at the top of the presentation, plus also countries like Lebanon, countries in Central Africa as well. So for them, they may well face higher food prices and potential political instability that results from this. More generally, in the global level, it's not expected that food prices will rise too much, largely because Ukraine's supplies of wheat have actually been reduced significantly because of the ongoing conflict. And so we're expecting more muted responses there.
Right. I want to also ask you, for the benefit of our viewers, if you could explain, why is Russia not honoring the grain deal? Russia, while notifying the, on the grain deal, accused the West of not keeping its side of the bargain. Exactly which parts of the bargain is Russia hinting at here?
So Russia is hinting at various sanctions which affect the ability of its farmers and agricultural exporters to get paid through the banking system in both Russia and from the West. And so Russia contends that although the West claims that these transactions are exempt from sanctions, in fact, they are actually being tied up in either red tape or risk-averse banking practices. And it's pretty clear from President Putin's statements last week that he has had enough of this and he feels that a deal has been broken. Now, of course, on the Western side, they just emphasized the fact that these shipments from Russia were exempt from sanctions, so they're not quite sure what the issue is in the first place. It's a little bit, to be honest, a bit of a dialogue of the deaf, and we will see whether or not people start listening and waking up now that there's a serious threat to the food security in a number of developing countries.
Right, Professor, I also want to understand, can the corridor operate without Russia?
The sea corridor probably cannot operate without Russia's consent. Russia has taken over at least one of the ports which Ukraine used to ship wheat from, and the other two ports are within shelling distance of Russian armed forces. So I think it's unlikely that ships will freely and willingly sail into those two ports either. So I think we will see a chilling effect on shipments from the Ukrainian ports to or through the Black Sea into the Mediterranean and then off to customers.
Right, Professor. I also want to understand now, food security has been an issue since the Russia-Ukraine war started. We saw how food prices started to soar. But now, can the international community step in and force the blockade?
I don't think that the international community could step in and enforce a shipment through the Black Sea without a major show of military force. Presumably, one would have to deter the Russians from shelling the ports which it does not control. And since Russia does control at least one of these ports, that would involve a military operation to recover it. So I think this is all very unlikely. It's pretty clear from the NATO summit that's just happened that the West is being very careful not to pick a direct fight with Russia, and trying to reinstate this deal using military force would, of course, run up against that constraint immediately.
Right, Professor Evenett, thank you very much for your perspective and for your views on this very, very crucial story that we're tracking right here on ET Now. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.